Hi, good night. Today I'm going to talk about trauma-informed teaching. We're going to start with identifying what it means. So, trauma-informed teaching. It is defined by the Arkansas State University as a system-wide approach to understanding the effect of violence, victimization, and other forms of trauma on individuals and communities. So, our trauma can come from our home, our school, the community. It can be directly to us or just exposed. Why is it important to know and address? Because childhood trauma can have a direct, immediate, and potentially overwhelming impact on the ability of a child to learn. They may display behaviors like those of ADHD or have emotional outbursts. They're not focused, they're not present, so even our very well planned out lessons are meaningless when they're focused on their trauma. Trauma-informed teaching provides students with healthy coping mechanisms to help them achieve better quality of life and a better, more successful version of themselves. Who is it for? Who is trauma-informed teaching for? It is for kids or students who have experienced physical abuse, verbal abuse, physical neglect, family members in jail, emotional neglect, domestic violence, divorce, death, abandonment, family with mental illness, natural disasters, life-threatening situations, medical procedures, terrorism, accidents, community violence. These are just a couple. And trauma is kind of like a spectrum. Everybody reacts differently to it. So we can't really assume we know where the child stands with an event that occurred in their life. When should trauma-informed teaching be utilized? When children demonstrate behavioral changes as a form to soothe or regulate their distress, and as a teacher, the person that's there day to day, we can observe any changes. Anything that's out of the ordinary, are they a little bit more withdrawn? Are they a little bit more upset? And we should investigate the cause. Why are they acting so different? When children share that they witness or suffer trauma, immediately start with trauma-informed teaching and let the other professionals know, create a team to help this child. And also when children are unable to cope and function. This was taken from the resilienteducator.com website. They also added that children usually are unable to ask for the help they need, so educators need to be well informed and able to identify trauma and symptoms. Trauma-informed teaching it is not becoming a counselor for our students and fixing them. It's about being empathetic teachers and help them be a better version of themselves. It is not a curriculum. It is us adapting strategies and changing our pedagogy to best support our students. Okay, moving on to describing what trauma-informed teaching practices may look like. Let's start with practice number 1, promote predictability and consistency. The description is knowing what is going to happen throughout the school day takes away the sense of unpredictability. Having classroom routines and procedures in place to provide students a sense of safety. So if children know exactly what we're going to start with, what's next, they're not going to always be on edge wondering, oh, how is it going to be different? Because maybe that's what they have at home and outside of school. So school is a place where they can have that expected activities and routine and schedules. So we can use visuals. We can use visuals for schedules, for routines, and it's really important to communicate any changes because sometimes transitions and changes may be hard for children who have suffered trauma. When can we use this? This strategy can be used when the student seems overly anxious. What's going to happen next? Who's this person visiting? And vigilant. It can be used during morning meetings so that all students have access to it. This helps especially students with special needs, kindergartners. You can have one-to-one conversations with students to inform them of any changes by pulling them to the side or giving them little sticky notes like, hey, today, no library, no computer lab. Sometimes, especially the older children, like to have that privacy. These are some of the The teaching practices are taken from Jessica Minahan and ASCD.org. Her article was Trauma-Informed Teaching Strategies. So we will be using some of the strategies she gave us. The second one, give supportive feedback to reduce negative thinking. This is huge. Children who endure trauma see themselves through a very negative lens in the world. So many traumatized students interpret information through a negative amplifier. It's important to use the positive sandwich approach when providing negative feedback. So maybe you're giving them back their test, like, hey, good job on number 2. You understood the sequence. You did every step. But number 3, maybe you didn't check for accuracy, line up the numbers so you can get it correct next time. But look, you picked it up again in number 4. Here you can see that you used a different strategy. That would be an example of using the positive sandwich approach. When to use this for students who are demonstrating a negative self-image. I can't do it. I don't know how. For children who tend to be hard on themselves. And it's important also for children who tend to misinterpret interactions. So those kids that go home and say that they got yelled at or the teacher said this when it didn't happen actually, but that is their perception of it. It's important to bring all that positivity in what we say to them. And once again, from the ASCD website. The third trauma-informed teaching practice is change the channel. And this is very linked to the previous practice. We talked about students seeing things through a negative lens, especially themselves. Jessica Minahan explains that traumatized children tend to focus on the negatives and engage in inaccurate thinking. Therefore, quiet time and reflections do not benefit these students. So we might think we're helping them by giving them time to reflect and just to think and process what's happening, but they go to that place that's very dark and they don't know how to move away from those thoughts. So instead, we want to provide them with engaging cognitive breaks, which will help them stop focusing on their worries. For example, Mad Libs, picture hunts, listen to music, trivia, write poetry. Just give them a little 2-minute, 3-minute break until they are able to refocus and self-regulate. When can we use this strategy? When a student is upset and is having trouble regulating their emotions. If you know you've hit that point where they need to cool down and the talking is not going to help at the moment, it's a good time to send them to a cognitive break. When you can observe a student's anxiety escalating, maybe they're not upset, they're not mad, they're not angry, you can see that they're beginning to get very anxious. Their bodies get stiff, their voice might be getting louder, or it might be the opposite. They might be shutting down, teary eyes. So this is a good time to send them. The last practice I would like to share with you is to employ thoughtful interactions. So before building relationships, we're going to interact with our students, and students who have gone through trauma react differently to our interactions. Traumatized students tend to be defensive towards the teacher because they lack that trust of the adult, the authority figure. They don't want to get close to not lose somebody as well. They can be defiant. They're seeking control. They don't have control at home, so they want to take the control from the teacher to have control at school, or they might just be non-engaged. Teachers may be triggering or escalating the students' behaviors with their body language, their tone, or their word choices. Getting to know the student can guide the selection of communication style. How close are you going to get to the student? How lengthy are you going to give the directions? And, what tone we're going to use. Interaction strategies to build a meaningful relationship are key for the student. They will feel safer, connected, and be more willing to take direction. That's where we want to get with all of our students. Teachers need to convey respect at all times and transparency. Tell them why you're asking them to do something. When can we use this? When students are demonstrating emotional outbursts, defiance, or are more withdrawn. Teachers should be more explicit with their interactions. Really think about it before you start speaking to them, and make careful selections of their communication style. So, for example, don't shout, "Stop tapping," in front of the class. Maybe write it on a little note and drop it off on their desk. More than likely, the student will stop tapping their pencil. Once again, this is from Trauma-Informed Teaching Strategies. Okay. Moving on to the last part of the presentation, the design actions for educational space. This I obtained from the learningforjustice.org, previously known as Teaching for Tolerance website. Incorporate time in classroom routines. So let me repeat that. Make the time, schedule it in, put it in the lesson plan within your routines to help identify and discuss their feelings, the students' feelings. Find visuals that are developmentally appropriate for the students. If they're young, maybe you want to use photographs, pictures, emojis, versus being older, you just use the words. You can use images versus scales. Help them assist them in identifying their emotions. That's a skill that needs to be taught. And usually their vocabulary is very limited to mad, happy, sad. When we meet them in school, so we need to build their vocabulary and their feelings. So model normalizing having big feelings and how to identify them. So maybe they don't know that embarrassed isn't the same thing as mad. Maybe embarrassed, you want to cry. Mad, you make your fist hard. You feel something in your stomach. So teach the children to identify what they are feeling. And sometimes we have more than one feeling. Another strategy that we can start implementing in our classroom is to provide help, not warnings. Children usually feel shame, sadness, or fear after having an outburst or other intense feelings. So after shouting or ripping or throwing things, the child is waiting for a big reaction from the adult, so they might be very nervous about it, but most of the time they're a little bit sad and embarrassed of what happened. Warnings and chances may trigger them to start again, since they're not trying to please the adult. It was just them losing control. You can use "I see you need help with" statements, and this was compiled by Linda O'Neill, Serena George, Jillian Wag. It was a PDF online. If you click on this white box, you'll get the link. They suggest that you use "I see you need help with" statements. For example, "I see you need help with cleaning that up." "I see you need help with not kicking the table." And don't just stop there. Come up with a plan to get the action, the task, or the behavior done that you're expecting. So maybe, okay, I'm going to help you pick 2 pieces up. You pick up the rest. I'm going to put a timer for 2 minutes, and then I need you to come back to your seat. Make up a plan where they have that collaboration. They see your willingness to help. And also acknowledge any efforts the student takes, because more than likely they won't be successful in completing the task of the behavior, because it takes about 10 steps. They need to relax, they need to clean up, they need to move. So maybe they take 2 out of the 10 steps. We want to congratulate and acknowledge them for making the effort towards the right direction. Here's a video that exemplifies how an adult should react during an emotional outburst. So I don't align with everything that is being said, but there are very strong portions, and I'm going to show you one a bit. So this is the dad. He is trying to help his daughter process the big feeling that she just had. Okay, so that's not the exact words we can use, but we want them to know that they still hold a very special spot in our classroom, and they're still going to be respected even though they had that outburst. Thank you, and have a great night.